Hi everyone, welcome back to my Scratch tutorial. I did a little update just today on adding directional movement to Scratch, and now I'm going to do an update to my boundaries video. So this is a video where I'm going to show you how to get Scratch, this little guy right here, this little sprite, to interact and respect walls essentially. Now, in my original video that some of you may have watched, I built the walls on the backdrop right over here. And I basically did what's called a color sensing boundary. I'm not going to be doing that for this one. I actually want to do a different style of boundary sensing, and this one's going to work a little bit better, I think. I've just found it's a little bit more flexible for what we're trying to do in the game, and it allows you to do a little bit more editing. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go down here to your sprite palette where all your sprites are stored. Right now all we have is Scratch, and we've got our backdrop with the XY grid. We're going to mouse over, choose a sprite, and we are going to go to paint a sprite. So this means we're going to create a sprite in the costume tab. So we're going to click paint a sprite, and it's going to bring us over to the costumes tab. Right now there's nothing in the palette here, and it's just called sprite 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this sprite. We're going to select sprite 1, and we're going to rename it level. Now, it's going to be just generic level because this is actually going to be the sprite that contains all the levels for our game, but we're going to actually have them as costumes, which I've found works much better as far as controlling what level you're in. So we're going to name it level, hit return to have it accept that. We're going to go to costume, and we're going to name it the costume level 1. I always label everything in Scratch the way I would do it in a normal workflow, just because it keeps things easier to understand, especially as your code gets more complicated. Now I'm going to make sure that it says convert to bitmap right here, because it means I'm working in the vector palette. You can tell because the tool palette here looks a little bit different, a little bit smoother. So in the costume palette, I'm going to show you how we can create a level, which is really easy, and then how you manipulate it a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our fill, which right now for me is set to purple. I'm going to click that little drop down menu, go all the way down here to the bottom, and you can see a white box with a red line across it. That means empty. So we're going to click that because I don't want to fill, I want just an outline. And I'm going to change this to about 15. Gives me a nice thick black outline. I'm going to go to the square here, and we're going to just create a boundary box around the edge of our game. So I'm going to click there, and then click in this top corner and drag all the way down to the bottom corner, and we're going to get a box. Remember, I can go over the edge there, just adjust it as need be, just so it sits right in. Make sure I'm fully zoomed out. Okay, so you'll notice that this is around the whole edge here, but on my actual game window, that's not what it looks like. Let's make sure we've positioned it correctly, so let's click and drag it so that it fits in the boundaries of the game window. There we go. That's perfect. So now we have a black box around the entire outside of the game. But we need to be able to test this, so we're actually going to create a second box. We're going to click on this box here again, and we're going to create a second box on the inside here around Scratch. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to test whether Scratch can go through these walls that we're creating. So now we've got a basic level design, and I say that using air quotations that you can't see, but this is basically an easy way to create a level. We can also use the line tool here to add some more complexity. Remember, if you click and drag, you can see it's kind of moving there. If you hold down Shift, it'll lock to 45-degree angles. So that's helpful if you're trying to build something that requires straight lines. You can just hold down the Shift key. And that adds a little bit of complexity there. I can also click on the arrow key here and move them around, or I can click on this one and change sort of the end point. So I'd bring that down a little bit because I don't think I have enough room to get by that with my character. Okay, so I've created a basic sort of level layout here. And now I'm going to start programming in how Scratch is going to interact with it. We don't need to do anything more in the actual level sprite at this moment, as long as you've got name level 1 and the sprite is called level. So let's click on Scratch. Let's click on the code tab to go back to his code, and we're going to start adding in a little bit of code to make him interact with these walls. Now, the way that you got to think about this when you're building in Scratch is this isn't like real life, and so our grammar is going to be a little bit different in describing what it does. The first thing you need to do is you need to go to your control statements, and we're going to add an if-then statement, and we're going to be nesting these if-then statements right inside our directional if-then statements, just like this. So make sure it's inside your right arrow if-then statement, because this if-then statement is going to be dependent on this first one being true. So it will only activate if this one's already activating, because we need the right arrow to be pressed, and then we're checking if we're touching a wall, which is exactly what we're going to write in here. So we're going to go to sensing, and we're going to go to this top one right here, and we're just going to grab the touching mouse pointer. You'll notice that it has a drop down, and the name of the sprite we've just created, the level sprite, is right there. Touching level, we're going to click, and we're going to drag that in there. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be forever checking if the right arrow is pressed, then change X by 10, but if it's touching level, then we want a different behavior. Now the way this actually works in Scratch, and the program is running too fast for you to be able to see it, and so it's going to appear like you're standing still, is you're going to be moving, changing your X by 10, moving, while pressing the right arrow. What's going to happen is your sprite is actually going to go into this wall, which is going to activate the touching level if statement. So it's going to sense that it's touching the wall, and then we basically want it to cancel the last movement. So it'll change X by 10, oh, I'm touching a wall, and then it will jump back to its previous position. So fast it appears to be staying still. So basically what we're doing is we're exactly canceling the X change in your if statement. So you go to motion, we're going to go change X by 10, we're going to drop it right in here, and we're just going to change that to -10. Oops, -10. So if this was like change X by 5 here, I'd have to make sure that my change X to cancel would be the same opposite amount. So it'd be change X by -5. So let's bring Scratch over here. Let's start our game. Click on the flag to activate the new code. And he now stops at the wall. He's actually jumping into the wall and jumping back to that position, but it looks like he's stopping because it's moving too fast. But you'll notice, still can go through this way, can't go through that way. I can go through this way, I can go through this way, but I cannot go through while pressing right. So, still have a little bit of coding to do. Now this is just a case of repeating code. Each of these if statements must have the canceling if statement of touching level within it. So we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to right click right here over this if, hit duplicate, and we're going to drag it down inside our left arrow. But remember, this is -10, so this must cancel out to 0 by being 10. And in our up and down, same thing goes. We're going to right click, duplicate, and drop it under there. Now remember, this is a Y axis change, so we need to get rid of that X axis, and we need to add in a Y axis right here. So change Y by +10 to go up. To cancel out a +10 change, we add in a -10 change. And right click, duplicate, and we're going to drop that in there. Same thing, it's a -10 change to go down. We cancel that out to 0 with a +10 change. Let's give it one quick test. So I can't go out this way, can't go out this way, can't go out this way, and can't go out this way. That means that Scratch is working properly. Remember, always click on the flag to double check and to also make sure that your code has been activated in the game. Okay, so that's how you get your basic boundaries working. What's really nice about this is because it says in here touching level, Level is the entire sprite and all its costumes. So if you design multiple different levels, you don't have to add those in here to say, oh, if touching level 1, touching level 2. No, it'll just, everything that's under the level sprite will now be respected by Scratch. It doesn't even have to be black. It can be any color. It can be any object. So if I, started drawing in some like kind of cool brick walls here or something, or added them into my sprite, it would still respect those boundaries.